Penelope Shore stepped through the sleek glass doors of L'artisan, clutching her tote bag close as the humid rain clung to her coat. She'd just survived a grueling 30-minute subway ride, and her damp hair stuck stubbornly to the nape of her neck. The subtle scent of fresh bread and herbs drifted from the kitchen ahead, promising warmth that contrasted sharply with the chill outside. Her simple blouse was slightly wrinkled, and her faded slacks were far from the crisp uniforms she now walked among. Around her, the restaurant thrummed with quiet efficiency. Waiters with perfectly starched shirts and polished shoes moved swiftly, nodding politely but warily at Penelope. The rising hum of subdued conversations and clink of fine china filled the polished dining room, where patrons sipped wine beneath soft, ambient light. The gleaming metal fixtures and pristine white tablecloths marked this place as the city's culinary jewel, a temple of haute cuisine. Penelope caught a few sideways glances, some curious, others judgmental, as she made her way toward the kitchen. A red-haired chef wiping his hands on a spotless apron frowned as she passed. It was clear she stood out like a sore thumb. "Hey," barked Marco, the head chef, from his station. His eyes narrowed as they swept over her unassuming outfit. "You must be the new busser. Grab some plates from the storage, now. And try to look like you belong here next time. This is a place for professionals, not tourists." His tone was sharp, laden with sarcasm. Penelope blinked but said nothing, the kitchen staff turning their attention from their prep to watch the exchange with thinly veiled amusement. The gauntlet had been thrown. Penelope's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded quietly at Marco's command. "Right away," she said with a calmness that masked the flicker of surprise and the sting beneath his sarcasm. She took a slow, deliberate breath, then turned away from the harsh fluorescent glare of the kitchen and the curious eyes that followed her every step. Instead of moving toward the storage area as instructed, she strode purposefully through the back hallway, bypassing the buzzing kitchen noise, and arrived at the Human Resources office just down the corridor. The polished mahogany door was cracked open, revealing Lisa waiting inside, sitting behind a sleek desk that gleamed under soft light. Lisa, a poised woman with a warm smile and intelligent eyes, had been the one who scheduled Penelope's grand entrance that morning. "Penelope, welcome," she said, standing to usher her in. The tone was completely different from the kitchen's chilly atmosphere. Here, she was met with genuine respect and warmth. Penelope returned the smile, though her eyes remained steady and professional. "Thank you, Lisa," she replied. There was no mention of Marco's sharp tone or his assumptions. She chose instead to move forward. Lisa gestured toward a chair opposite her, and Penelope sat, straight-backed, her hands folded lightly on her lap. "We've been looking forward to your arrival," Lisa began, her voice low but sincere. "The team could use your experience and guidance. I hope your trip wasn't too exhausting." Her glance flicked to Penelope's damp hair and simple clothing. Penelope nodded. "It was a long commute, and the rain didn't help," she admitted. "I came straight from a meeting at our other property, so I didn't have time to change." She smoothed her blouse without fuss. "I believe in being present, even if it means arriving in less than perfect attire." Lisa's smile deepened appreciably. "That's exactly the kind of authenticity this place needs." She glanced down at her schedule, then back up. "Would you like me to notify Marco and the kitchen staff of your arrival? Perhaps with your official title?" "Yes, please," Penelope replied. "But let them meet me properly. There's no need for more assumptions." Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, Marco leaned against the counter, still smirking, hands on his hips. He was holding court, feeding off the immediate gratification of his public put-down. "Did you see that?" he boasted to the sous chefs nearby, his voice loud enough for others to hear. The new girl, dressed like she just rolled out of bed, didn't even question it. "I told her to fetch plates and clean up, and she said, right away, like she's some obedient busser. One sous chef laughed softly, shaking his head. She looked totally lost. Bet she doesn't last a week. Another nodded, whispering, serves her right for not dressing the part. Exactly, Marco said, his grin widening. This is a place for professionals, not amateurs playing dress-up. The staff's laughter and murmurs grew. Some chefs busied themselves with their tasks but kept glancing at the kitchen entrance, waiting to see if Penelope would actually go back and touch any plates. But she never did. Instead, the clock ticked steadily toward the staff meeting that Lisa had scheduled to introduce Penelope properly. Whispers and side conversations peppered the break area and kitchen corners. Have you heard who she really is? One server asked another. Manager, or something? Nah, probably just a temp, another replied, doubt lingering in her tone. Marco's stories had seeded skepticism and scorn among many. The idea of someone so casually dressed and so quietly confident actually being in charge seemed ludicrous. Yet, there was an undercurrent of curiosity too. Penelope's quiet dignity had unsettled more than just Marco. Several kitchen hands who'd worked at other locations where they'd heard her name muttered amongst themselves, maybe there's more to her than meets the eye. As the meeting time approached, tension hung in the air like lingering smoke from a stove, thick and expectant. Penelope, having changed out of sight, had joined Lisa in a quietly prepared dining room tailored for formal introductions. Her blouse straightened, hair pinned back, yet still comfortably suited to her informal style. She looked every bit the leader Lisa had described but remained approachable, steady, and composed. When Lisa signaled that it was time, they rose together and made their way to the front. The anticipation among staff crescendoed, waiters stopped polishing silverware, chefs paused plating dishes, and even Marco's confident swagger momentarily faltered as he noticed the gathering. Penelope's response to the dismissal and mockery in the kitchen had been measured but clear. She wasn't here to justify herself through confrontation, but to assert her role through presence. Her choice to bypass petty indignities and meet the management's welcome first was a strategic move, one that kept her firmly in control amid growing uncertainty. Notes of surprise rippled through the staff conversations, but the unanswered questions stayed suspended, waiting for the meeting to resolve the rumors and give them all clarity. As Penelope waited quietly beside Lisa, the mist of judgment began to lift, replaced by a growing sense of inevitability. Change was coming. Her calm had not weakened. The protests of the familiar and comfortable were about to encounter something steadier and more compelling than they hadn't yet imagined. The midday bustle quieted as Lisa stepped onto the small raised platform at the head of the dining room, her voice clear and commanding in the softly lit space. The staff, caught mid-task, gathered with reluctant curiosity, murmurs rippling through the tables and chairs as they took in the unexpected summons. Penelope stood beside Lisa, poised yet relaxed, her presence immediately drawing a curious gaze from every corner of the room. Thank you all for coming, Lisa began, her tone measured. I want to introduce you to Penelope Shore, who will be joining us here as the new owner and managing director of L'Artisan. There was a moment of stunned silence. The word owner hung in the air like a sudden gust of wind scattering papers. The staff shifted uneasily, glancing at one another in disbelief. Many had seen Penelope only moments before as the quietly folded figure in simple clothes, mistaken for a busser or a junior staff member. Now she was something entirely different, the very person in charge of their workplace. Marco shuffled and last, his face reddened from exertion in the kitchen but paling as he caught sight of Penelope framed by Lisa's formal introduction. His confident grin vanished, replaced by frozen disbelief. For a brief, awkward moment, he stood rooted to the entrance, unable to move forward or retreat. Several waiters exchanged surprised looks, whispering low among themselves. Emma, a sharp-eyed server who had watched Marco's mockery earlier, raised her brows so slightly it was almost imperceptible. Tom, a line cook new to the team, swallowed hard, his previous skepticism replaced by a bewildered respect. Lisa gestured for Penelope to speak, and she stepped forward with grace, the air shifting as all eyes fell on her. Her voice was calm but carried unmistakable authority. "I know this may come as a surprise," she began evenly. "I deliberately chose to arrive today without formality because I wanted to meet each of you without pretense or the veil of expectation that a title might bring." There was a pause as the room absorbed her words, the underlying message settling in. She had not come to demand respect based on status or appearance but to earn it through leadership and action. Marco finally found his voice, but it was thin, edged with embarrassment. "But you looked like," he struggled to find the right words, "like someone who wasn't staff at all, not the owner, of course." Penelope's eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "Appearance can be deceiving," she replied quietly. "It's how we carry ourselves and how we treat one another that truly defines our place here." The attentive hush was punctuated only by the soft rustle of uniforms and the faint clinking of silverware set aside. The staff watched, caught between old assumptions and this new assertion of leadership. Lisa spoke again, her tone reinforcing the moment's import. "Penelope brings with her years of experience running successful restaurants across the country. She's transformed struggling kitchens into thriving, award-winning establishments and is well known for her fair but firm leadership style." A murmur of surprise spread. The murmurs were no longer tinged with doubt but a grudging acknowledgement. Penelope's reputation, now confirmed, began to replace the earlier skepticism. Penelope continued. "I'm here not to disrupt for disruption's sake but to help us build something stronger and more united. This restaurant has incredible talent and potential. What I hope to accomplish is a place where every one of you feels valued and heard." Her words landed with a weight that resonated deeply, even with those predisposed to doubt her. Some nodded subtly, others stood straighter, their postures adjusted by an invisible command. Marco, sensing the tide turning in the room and feeling the sting of his earlier judgment, looked unsure. His fingers drummed nervously against the wooden wall behind him. The staff's eyes briefly flicked to him, and whispers began anew, not about Penelope's attire, but about respect, leadership, and professionalism. Emma caught Marco's eye and gave a barely perceptible shake of her head, her expression blending disbelief and disapproval. Tom cleared his throat, glancing toward Penelope as if reassessing the assumptions he had harbored. The meeting moved into a brief Q&A session where Penelope answered questions with clarity and poise. She spoke about staff development plans, menu updates, and efforts to create an inclusive, supportive workplace culture. Her focus was clear: the team would be partners in progress. When the meeting ended, the room slowly emptied, but the atmosphere had shifted undeniably. Penelope's presence lingered, a reminder of the unexpected change of command and a challenge to preconceptions. Marco retreated toward the kitchen entrance, caught off guard by the complete turnaround. His earlier mocking bravado was replaced with hesitant uncertainty. He exchanged a glance with a close sous chef, who shrugged in quiet disbelief. Penelope watched from the platform, her face unmarked by triumph but steady with confidence. She knew that winning true respect would take time, but the foundation had been set. The old story was no longer the one driving the restaurant forward. Today, a new chapter had begun. After the meeting dispersed, Lisa motioned for the remaining staff to continue their duties but invited Penelope to stay behind with a select few. The room's lighting softened slightly as the quiet hum of resumed activity filled the edges of their space. Lisa turned to Penelope with a smile as she began to elaborate on the credentials that defined her leadership and authority. "Penelope's background is truly remarkable," Lisa began, her voice steady but rich with respect. Before joining L'Artisan, she managed several critically acclaimed boutique restaurants along the East Coast. She has a reputation for turning struggling kitchens into profitable, award-winning venues while maintaining a nurturing environment for staff at every level. Emma, the server who had exchanged glances with Marco, listened intently, as did Tom and several other employees who remained. Lisa's words painted a picture of a leader who had done more than just climb the corporate ladder. Penelope had reshaped it entirely. Penelope nodded subtly, acknowledging the praise but remaining composed. "I've always believed that the core of any successful eatery isn't just the food," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "It's the people, their dedication, their respect for each other, and their trust in the shared mission." She paused, her pale eyes scanning the attentive faces before her. "That's why I deliberately dressed simply today. I wanted to meet everyone without the distraction of status or formality. I wanted to see how the team interacted naturally, how the kitchen and floor staff worked together." There was a faint murmur of surprise. Someone whispered, "She did come from the morning meeting, didn't she?" The small talk grew briefly into genuine interest as Penelope continued. "My morning was hectic," she explained. "I had a strategy session across town at another location. There wasn't time to change into something more conventional." "But that's exactly the point. I don't believe leadership should require formal appearances. What matters is what we do, not how we look doing it." Tom glanced at her with an expression of newfound respect. "It's refreshing," he said softly. "Most bosses wouldn't think to approach things that way." The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. The skepticism that had clung like a shadow was now dissolving into curiosity and tentative acceptance. Lisa added, "Our goal under Penelope's guidance is to foster a culture rooted in humility and hard work. She believes in giving people chances, in providing support without micromanagement." Penelope smiled briefly, a delicate but genuine curve that softened her otherwise reserved demeanor. "I want this to be a place where everyone feels they belong and can thrive. That doesn't mean easy or without high standards. It means respect and fairness first, then excellence." Emma, emboldened, spoke up. "So next time Marco's being a bit overbearing, that won't fly?" Penelope's eyes met Emma's. "Exactly. Respect is the foundation, and anyone who undermines that won't be in this kitchen very long." A flicker of unease danced briefly behind Marco's eyes if anyone had been watching him, but many were too captivated by the shift in tone and the clarity of Penelope's convictions to notice. The conversation turned practical. Penelope outlined initial plans for weekly team check-ins, fresh training programs, and open forums where staff would be encouraged to share ideas and concerns directly with management. "We'll be looking at ways to reward dedication and innovation," she said. "And importantly, I want to ensure that everyone understands their vital role here. No position is too small or unimportant." Lisa circled back to Penelope's leadership style. "She's well known for her fairness and humility, rare in our industry. She approaches every tough decision with transparency and the goal of empowering those around her." Penelope leaned forward, voice steady but earnest. "This restaurant has immense potential. My purpose here isn't just to lead but to listen. To build a community shaped by trust, dedication, and mutual respect." The room seemed to breathe more freely, as if a weight had lifted. Staff members exchanged looks that were no longer clouded by doubt but infused with the possibility of change. Even those who had bristled with judgment moments earlier found themselves reconsidering their assumptions. A soft chuckle escaped Emma's lips, breaking the lingering tension. "Well, I guess I owe you an apology too," she said candidly. "I probably judged too quickly." Penelope inclined her head with quiet grace. "We all have moments like that. What matters is how we move forward." As the afternoon light dipped lower through the windows, Penelope excused herself briefly, explaining the need to check on ongoing operations across the floor. She moved with an easy confidence, her simple outfit now seeming a conscious choice that underscored rather than undermined her authority. Staff who passed her along the way gave nods of acknowledgement, some tentative, others more assured. The change was subtle but undeniable. Marco, now isolated and wary, lingered near the kitchen doorway. He fidgeted with the edge of his apron, stealing glances at Penelope as she engaged staff with quiet competence. For a moment, something like respect flickered in his eyes before it was quickly masked by stubborn pride. Penelope caught his gaze briefly, offering neither a smile nor a frown, just steady acknowledgement. The message was clear: the days of underestimating people based on appearance or assumptions were over here. By the time she returned to Lisa's office a few minutes later, the steady rhythm of the restaurant had resumed, but the undercurrent had shifted. Penelope's presence had reshaped the narrative. Lisa offered her a knowing look. "You made quite an impression." Penelope exhaled softly, a shadow of a smile touching her lips. "I hope it's just the beginning." The path ahead was challenging but ripe with possibility. Standing there amid the quiet hum of staff settling into their duties, Penelope felt not only the weight of responsibility but the thrill of leadership reclaimed, on her own terms. The morning after the meeting, the atmosphere in Lartisan had palpably changed. Gone were the whispered smirks and sideways glances that had greeted Penelope's arrival. Instead, a professional energy filled the air, as staff members adjusted their approaches, some exchanging tentative smiles in halls and kitchens where coldness had lingered before. Marco found himself summoned by Lisa to the HR office without delay. The imposing doorway swallowed him up, his usual swagger slipped away under the weight of the formal invitation. Inside, Lisa sat with a composed, businesslike demeanor, her fingers interlaced on the desk between them. "Marco," she began, her tone direct but measured, "we need to address your conduct yesterday. Publicly humiliating a colleague based on assumptions, especially one of our leadership, is unacceptable." Marco's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. He knew better now. His usual bluster meant little against the firm authority Lisa exuded. As a consequence, Lisa continued, "You will be temporarily removed from supervisory duties pending a professionalism and communication training program. During this time, I expect full cooperation and reflection on how your behavior affects team morale." The reprimand was clear, a significant shift from the leniency Marco had come to expect. He nodded stiffly, the sting of being held accountable fresh yet oddly sobering. Meanwhile, Penelope set about affirming her leadership through tangible changes. She introduced weekly check-ins, encouraging open dialogue between all staff levels. Her training sessions, candid and inclusive, prioritized both skill development and respect for workplace culture. Slowly but surely, colleagues who had been skeptical or distant found themselves drawn into a more cohesive community. Emma, once wary and aligned with the kitchen clique that looked surprised by Penelope's role, now approached the new director with questions and suggestions. Tom, the line cook, volunteered ideas for streamlining kitchen workflow. Even some chefs who had initially been resistant began engaging, the tension replaced by cautious optimism. The restaurant's energy shifted from fragmented factions to collaborative teams, a steady buzz of confidence humming beneath the surface. One afternoon, in a narrow hallway adjacent to the kitchen, Penelope and Marco crossed paths. The atmosphere felt taut, the past grievances hung silently like unspoken debts. Marco stopped, folding his arms and avoiding eye contact. Penelope paused calmly, her gaze steady as she spoke, voice low but firm. "Marco, I expect professionalism and respect from everyone, especially those in leadership roles. Your actions yesterday were not in line with that." His eyes flicked up, revealing a flicker of regret beneath his guarded expression. "I understand," he muttered, voice rough but sincere. "I'll do better." She nodded once, signaling the conversation was over but leaving the door open for change. It was a moment of resolution, no grand apologies, no lingering resentment, just recognition and a clear boundary. As Marco walked away, Penelope continued down the corridor, her steps confident and purposeful. Throughout the following weeks, it became evident that the restaurant's fortunes were improving. Morning briefings were lively and respectful, the kitchen and dining staff worked in greater harmony. Penelope's presence was no longer a source of whispered doubt but a steadying influence that all recognized and relied upon. Her deliberate choice to enter the workplace plainly dressed now made perfect sense to many. It had been a test and a lesson in humility and authenticity. Penelope Shore was not just an owner who commanded from above, she was a leader who listened, understood, and inspired. One afternoon, as the lunch rush waned and sunlight spilled through the large windows, Penelope made her rounds through the bustling dining room. Servers refilled glasses and chefs sent out plates with newfound ease. The once indifferent murmurs had transformed into genuine conversation and shared pride. Pausing briefly near the entrance, she glanced back toward the kitchen doorway, where Marco stood, a faint nod exchanged between them. It was unspoken acknowledgement, an understanding that the past was behind them, replaced now by mutual respect. With a slight lift of her chin and a composed smile, Penelope moved onward. Her stride was assured, her authority unmistakable. L'artisan thrived under her guidance, the restaurant no longer just a place of polished surfaces but one alive with trust, respect, and shared purpose. She had arrived as the woman mistaken for a busser, but she stayed as the force that transformed the very heart of the kitchen.